Hello, my name is Dr. Talia Marcheggiani. I'm a naturopathic doctor with a focus in mental health and hormones. A naturopathic doctor is a primary health care practitioner who is registered and licensed. We go through 4 years of undergraduate education. My undergrad degree is in life sciences, so it's like a pre-med education. And then we do 4 years of naturopathic college, which has a lot of similarities between medical school. It's got a lot of the biomedical sciences like diagnostics and clinical exams and anatomy and physiology and immunology and a lot of the similar topics that are studied in med school. But we also, on top of that, add on lots of education in nutrition, in Chinese medicine, in herbal medicine, and other healing modalities. We don't use medications, although we do have plans that assist those who use medications, and we focus most of all on treating the root cause of disease and working with every single person as an individual. So just because you have similar symptoms to person A or person B doesn't mean that you need the same treatment as those people. Believe that everyone has a unique and individual needs and a unique and individual body. And no two people with, let's say, depression require the same therapy. And so, what we do is spend a long time with our patients, ask about diet, ask about sleep, ask about energy levels. I ask about menstruating people's periods and what they're like, your libido, all of these different aspects that indicate the state of your health and point us in the direction of your goals and what optimal health looks like for you. So, can you see yourself in 3 years? How does your body feel? How does your mind feel? And today, I want to talk about one of my passions, which is nutrition, especially for mental health. So, how often have you, especially if you suffer from a mental health condition, gone to your primary healthcare practitioner, like your doctor, your psychiatrist? How often have they asked you what you're eating? How often have they had you fill out a diet diary? And how often have they told you that there is a connection between what you eat and how you feel mentally and emotionally, your motivation levels and your energy levels, and whether or not you have depression. I doubt that this has happened to you, right? I mean, when I was suffering, nobody ever asked me about my diet until I went to a naturopathic doctor myself. And I was prescribed medication. Everyone was really quick to tell me that I needed a medication to correct my symptoms. And I think that medication has a time and place for a lot of people, but for me, it never seemed right because I always felt like the medication wasn't completely fixing my problems. So, how could a deficiency in medication be the source of my problems? It just didn't make sense. And I had also had experience with changing my diet and playing around with nutrition a little bit, and I noticed a drastic change in how I felt in my energy levels, in my digestion, and also in my mood. Because when you have good energy, you definitely have improvements in mood. And when you have improvements in mood, usually you notice your energy benefit. So, this presentation is called Food for Mood. And my name again is Dr. Talia Marcheggiani. So, mental health is a very, very common issue. We know that mental health conditions are affecting something like 20 to 25% of adults. And this is probably an underestimation. This is the amount of people who are diagnosed, who are treated, and probably doesn't encompass that huge section of the population that just don't feel optimal, that don't feel like they're living their optimal, healthy, energetic, passionate life. People suffer from anxiety, depression, bipolar, OCD, or any other diagnosed mental health condition. And these symptoms are characterized by feeling depressed, so low mood, low energy, maybe mania, maybe anxiety, physical symptoms of anxiety or worry or rumination, feeling like your mind is on a hamster wheel, irritability, low patience, low tolerance for people's crap. And you might notice hormonal ups and downs. If you're in your menstruating years, you may notice that a week before your period or 2 weeks before your period, you notice huge shifts in your mood. Self-mutilation, like hair pulling or skin picking, can be symptoms. Apathy, numbness, dissociation, social withdrawal, social anxiety, inability to concentrate, Even things like changes in your appetite and weight gain, and changes in sleep, and difficulties falling asleep or staying asleep, in energy dips throughout the day, waking up groggy in the morning, having a hard time getting out of bed, experiencing panic attacks, experiencing physical sensations of anxiety, even digestive concerns like IBS can be linked to anxiety. And then beyond that, if we zoom out, the umbrella of stress, so people who are just overstressed, some estimates are that stress encompasses 70 to 90% of doctors' visits, and we're not doing anything to talk about it. So, how do we know that there's a connection with food and mood? It's really difficult to study food because you can't really conduct an experiment like you can with drugs or medications, where you get two groups of people randomized, so there's no difference between the groups. You don't have one group who's exercising and one group who's just sitting on their couch all day. You take two randomized groups of people, you give one group the drug or the pill or the intervention, and then you give the other group a placebo that looks exactly like the drug, pill, and or intervention, but it doesn't do what the drug, pill, or intervention does. You make sure that those subjects don't know what they're getting, and you make sure that the people examining them and assessing them don't know whether they've gotten the treatment or the placebo. And then you examine the results. Did the people that got the treatment, did they do better than the group that didn't? This is a randomized controlled trial. Very difficult to do with nutrition. Because with nutrition, it's hard, first of all, to get people to comply with a therapy. We all know if we're eating kale or if we're eating pizza. And it's also hard to eliminate these other factors. So, what we have relied on doing is to also, nutrition results take long periods of time to manifest, years. We're not always going to see the detrimental effects of eating pizza for breakfast every day for the rest of your life in like 8 weeks, like a normal clinical trial is run. And we're not going to see the benefits of eating kale or having a good quality breakfast for 8 weeks. It's going to take years for us to really see the impact of those health choices. There's also something called the healthy user bias. So somebody who's eating kale for breakfast might also be running. They might also be sleeping well. They might also be meditating, doing yoga, all these other things that we assume are good for us. And therefore, it's impossible to separate the kale eater from the pizza eater. So we rely a lot on certain studies that have been done in the past, like the Minnesota starvation experiment conducted in the 1950s, where they took 36-year-old men and they took them for 6 months, and they gave them 50% of the nutrients that they require. So we call it the starvation experiment, but it's interesting to note that these people were given 1,500 calories a day, which for a lot of people, like if you've ever pulled up a MyFitnessPal, it might tell you that that's what you should be eating. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of the effects on this experiment. So they were put in a controlled environment. They were given their food allotment of 1,500 calories a day, which was deficient in the nutrients that their bodies needed to thrive and even to survive. They obviously lost a lot of weight. They were obsessed with food, but they also experienced a lot of mental health symptoms. So they experienced depression, mania, anxiety, irritability. They started self mutilating. They felt apathy. They felt social withdrawal, and they had the inability to concentrate. Now, what does that remind you of? Well, some of these symptoms of mental health conditions that we just explored in the slide above. This is just through nutrient deprivation. Often, when we talk about nutrition, a lot of people are focusing on the fact that North Americans are overnourished. And what this means is that they're just eating too much. But we're actually going to find out as we continue to go through this that we're overnourished in some aspects of our diet, but undernourished in others. And this is the impact. This study characterizes the impact of undernourishing the body for just 6 months and how that can impact our mood. Most people in North America are consuming SAD, the standard American diet. I'm going to use Canadians because I'm Canadian, but there's also some research from Australia in the slides to follow. So it's really interesting to note that 48% of the food that Canadians are eating is from ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are what Michael Pollan calls the edible food-like products, like, that stuff that you find in the grocery store, like Cheetos and Doritos. 48% of the diet. So processed foods is something like, maybe microwave dinner, stuff that resembles actual food. I'd probably say that pizza is a processed food, not an ultra processed food. An ultra processed food, like you don't really look at a Dorito and say, oh, that definitely is made from corn. So this is a food that doesn't resemble anything found in nature. And almost half of the food that Canadians are consuming currently is from these foods. These foods do not contain nutrients. They don't contain any of the ingredients that our bodies need to run. It's like running your car, and instead of putting gasoline in it, you're just putting like water or something. And then wondering why it's not running or why it's not working properly, why the engine's failing. Even those, though, it's important to note, who are eating whole foods, like even if you're eating kale and rice, it's very possible that we're still getting less nutrients than we got back in the day because the soil quality is not replenished with all of the nutrients that it normally has. And and therefore it's not getting into our food. A primary example of this is magnesium deficiency. It's estimated that 40 to 60% of people are magnesium deficient. Where do you get magnesium? You get it from spinach and chard. You need about 2 cups a day of either of those foods to get the 300 milligrams of magnesium that we need to run all of 300 chemical reactions that magnesium's in charge of, including calming, muscle relaxing, digestion, supporting our mood, and our soil is also deficient in it. So even if you are eating like tons and tons of chard, you might actually need to eat more in order to get that magnesium. Also, it's important to note that consuming ultra processed foods it can deplete nutrients in the body and therefore requires us to input even more nutrients. So it's like this vicious cycle of spending our food allotment on ultra processed foods actually requires us to eat even better quality foods to make up for it. But we all know that we're probably not doing that. So when you eat because you're sad, but now you're just fat and sad. This was the slide that came up when I Googled the sad diet. And this is a sad, sad dog who's probably eating corn-based dog food. So why does it matter? So it's really interesting. Like before I started showing the slides, I mentioned, whose doctor has asked them, whose medical doctor or psychiatrist has asked them what they eat, asked them to fill out a diet diary. Kudos if you have a doctor or psychiatrist like that, but I have not personally had one, which is why I decided to become a naturopathic doctor so I could really dive into this kind of thing with people. And it's funny because, for example, like most of my patients and I have heard from our medical colleagues that food doesn't impact X, Y, Z condition. Food doesn't, healthy diets are good and all, but eating well is not going to benefit your skin condition. Well, what's your skin made out of? Oh, well, it's made of skin cells. Well, what are skin cells made out of? Oh, well, they're made out of fats and carbohydrates and proteins and the various nutrients that come from our diet. So, our brain is no different. What is our brain made of? Our brain is made of fats and proteins and neurochemicals, which are also made of proteins. And these are composed of the ingredients that we get from food. Our body can create nutrients and can create certain chemicals, but it's getting the raw material for a lot of those chemicals from our diet. And if we don't get those foods in, how else are we going to get them in? It's kind of like wheeling your car to be full of gasoline. Just doesn't happen. You got to stop off at a gas station and you got to fill the tank. And our brains are very hungry. They require a lot of energy. So our brains use about 20% of our resting calories. So when you're just sitting around doing nothing, your brain is taking up a fifth of the energy that you're giving it through the food that you're eating. And like people who play chess, they say that chess players are burning energy like marathon runners because their brains are so active, even though their bodies are still. Every minute, a liter of blood passes through the brain, and the goal of this is to remove waste, but also to nourish the brain tissue to make sure that it has the energy that it needs. The primary fuel of the brain is glucose, and it needs 130 grams per day. This can be found in carbohydrate foods, But it can also be made through a process of gluconeogenesis. So people who are on ketogenic diets, their brains just don't stop working. Their brain switches to a different fuel. But if you're giving your brain glucose, it's using up 130 grams of that glucose every single day. This is over 60% of our body's requirements, even though the brain only weighs 2% of our body. So the brain needs a lot of energy. And so what's going to notice the impact of a bad diet first? Probably the brain, because it's the front line recipient of everything that you're eating every single day. The brain is composed mainly of fat, 60%. So anyone that's trying to lose weight, keep in mind that the most important hunk of fat in your body is between your ears. And our brain chemicals are made up of protein. So the backbone of our neurochemicals, the serotonin and dopamine that we talk about, are actually made of amino acids, which are proteins that are found in food. So for example, dopamine. Dopamine is a very important chemical for mood. It motivates us, it makes us sensitive to reward. It's what Jaak Panksepp calls the molecule of nuts and knowledge. This is like, a squirrel digging for nuts or somebody searching on the internet for knowledge. It's this really excited, buzzy, rewardy feeling that you get when you're engaged in a task, when you're focused on something. It's a Labrador chasing after a ball. It's this really great, focused, excited, motivated, purpose-driven feeling. And that's what dopamine gives us. Tyrosine, an amino acid, is the backbone of dopamine. We get tyrosine from meat and fish and eggs and other protein-rich sources of food in the diet. In order to make dopamine from tyrosine, which first gets translated into phenylalanine, then gets made into dopamine, and then gets made into epinephrine and then norepinephrine, we need to use magnesium. So these are all the cofactors. These help these neurochemicals get made. Magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin B6, vitamin B2, B3, folate, and iron. So I don't know about you, but so many of my patients come in iron deficient, either vegans or vegetarians, or people who are just menstruating heavily, maybe have poor issues with absorption in their gut. Magnesium, we already talked about, huge source of deficiency in the diet. Zinc is hard to come by from the standard American diet. Good quality B vitamins like folate are also hard to come by. Vitamin C as well. All of these nutrients as well are further depleted in stress and in trying to digest and process processed foods. So in order to make dopamine, in order to feel that buzzy, zingy, excited reward feeling, we need all of these ingredients to come into our body through the diet or through supplementation. Serotonin is our happy hormone. I actually have a necklace with serotonin on it. And serotonin is the target of antidepressant medication. The selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor medications like Prozac, Cipralex, Celexa. These drugs are thought to stop the reuptake, the vacuuming up of serotonin in the brain. So when your brain cells release serotonin, they hang around in what we call the postsynaptic cleft, and they stimulate the postsynaptic neuron, telling that neuron to essentially feel happy, feel calm, feel contented. I think of serotonin as our like blissed out sunshine chemical. You're sitting on a picnic blanket with your best friends. You're having delicious food. There's wine, there's music, the sun is shining on your skin, and you just feel like there's nothing in the world that you could ever want, or there's nowhere else you'd rather be. I think that would represent serotonin in its purest form, just all around good, warm, happy, open, connected feelings. And it's thought one of the theories of what causes depression and anxiety, called the monoamine hypothesis, is that people who suffer from depression and anxiety have a deficiency of serotonin in their brain and thus are prescribed Prozac to correct this imbalance. Well, we obviously know that that's not 100% true. Just based on some further research, there's no evidence of this lack of serotonin in the brain. There's no evidence of this chemical imbalance. And there's also very, variable evidence on the efficacy or how well antidepressants work. In the majority of people, there's a small significant benefit that's significant in research, but not really clinically. In some people, they experience severe side effects like low libido, numbness, weight gain, issues with sleep, anxiety, sometimes even suicidality. And in a very slim amount of people, they do notice a benefit. And probably the majority, there's maybe like a small improvement in how they feel that encourages them to move to supporting their life in positive ways. Now, serotonin, though, does cause us to feel happy. So while if you're depressed, it doesn't mean you just have a deficiency. We actually need to make serotonin. So even if you're taking an antidepressant, how are you getting that serotonin in the first place if you're not making it in the brain? Tryptophan is an amino acid, and that's where serotonin first starts to become made. Tryptophan found in like turkey, in eggs, it's found in pumpkin seeds, very rare in vegetarian foods. Um, and it's an essential amino acid, meaning that we can't make it in the body. The only way we can get tryptophan into our bodies and into our brains is through the food that we're consuming. Tryptophan gets turned into another amino acid called 5-HTP. 5-HTP gets turned into serotonin, and then serotonin becomes melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. This is why there's often a connection with depression and issues with falling and staying asleep, or hypersomnia, feeling too tired to get out of bed. In order to complete all of these interactions, all of these chemical reactions, we need, again, iron, phosphorus, calcium, B6, and zinc. So, diet doesn't do anything for depression, but research tells differently. Diet happens to be a modifiable risk factor. So, what are risk factors for depression? Things like genes, early childhood trauma, poverty, low socioeconomic status, comorbid conditions like OCD, inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions, and like I said, physical or mental trauma as well. And those are considered non-modifiable risk factors. You can't change your genetics directly. You can't really change your childhood trauma. You can maybe go to therapy and help work with it, but you can't do much about the fact that it happened to you. And so, but what are some modifiable risk factors? Well, our lifestyle. So, our levels of inflammation in the body, which is connected to diet, our gut microbiome, connected to diet, the general health of our body and brain and mind, which is also connected to diet. So, diet is a significant modifiable risk factor. It's something that we can change to affect how we feel. We just have to know how to do it. So, the Mediterranean diet is probably one of the most studied healthy diets. And we found that people that follow the Mediterranean diet had lower rates of mood disorders and anxiety. Now, what does that tell us? It doesn't tell us a whole lot, because we know that people that follow the Mediterranean diet may have just happened to have low depression anxiety for a different reason. Maybe they were exercising more. Maybe they were living in a sunnier climate. Maybe they had better family structures, lower genetic risk of depression. We don't know, but we know that there's a connection there, a correlation. And people that followed the standard American diet had higher rates of mood disorders and anxiety. Again, correlation is not causation, but we're seeing a link and a pattern. And whenever we see a correlation, it helps to further investigate to understand if that is a causal link or just, coincidence. So in Alberta, Canada, where I'm from, a study showed that 6,000 or over 6,000 grade 5 students who had the lowest healthy eating score, so we're consuming the most ultra processed foods, the least whole foods, experienced the most worry and sadness. So the worse food they ate, the more mental health issues they experienced. Again, this is correlation. Is there a reason that these grade 5 students are eating poorly that is connected to their depression and anxiety or their worry? Or is it because of the diet? Or is that connected in some way? A study in Spain showed that fast food and packaged baked goods increased the risk of depression, irritability, and anxiety by 49%. But they also found that the bad eating preceded the mental health issues. So they weren't eating badly because they had mental health issues, which could be a factor, right? When you feel depressed, it's hard to make yourself a smoothie. You're more likely to grab like a bowl of crappy cereal or something that's going to make you feel good immediately. But we saw that their bad diet or that kind of eating happened before they experienced these mood changes. Other studies have shown that magnesium, zinc, iron, and potassium intake are correlated with better mental health functioning. And this is either through dietary intake or from supplementation. Now we have a randomized control trial. So we have a trial called SMILES. It's an Australian study. It's not a very big study, but it sets a precedent for the power of food to affect mood. This is a very exciting study in the world of mental health and nutrition. So in this study, they took 67 adults. They all had major depressive disorder. They randomized them. So they made sure there was no difference between the two of them. There wasn't one group that exercised more, one group that, had a better childhood than the other. And one group got 12 weeks of dietary counseling, and it was very simple health advice. And the other 12 got a support group where they sort of talked through their problems. And this is to control for the fact that when you're meeting in a group with someone for 12 weeks, there's going to be positive mood benefits. Maybe there's some healing aspect of the group or talking about your problems or feeling like you're getting help with your problem, right? So they gave one group sort of regular counseling therapy that we know can benefit mood. And they gave the other group, instead of the more mental emotional therapies, they gave them dietary counseling, told them what to eat every day and how to track their food. So at the end of these 12 weeks, the group that got support therapy, 8% of them experienced remission. What is remission? It means that they no longer have major depressive disorder. They're essentially cured, 8%. So pretty powerful group therapy. Almost a tenth of the group were no longer depressed just from sitting and talking for 12 weeks. But the group that got dietary counseling, 32% of them experienced remission. So almost a third of the people who received 12 weeks of dietary counseling, simply educating them on better food choices. It wasn't a crazy diet. It wasn't that they had to go and only eat kale. It was simply following kind of a food guide level of nutrition advice and probably tracking their food and just paying attention to their diet and their health and their food choices. And a third of them were no longer depressed. Okay. So those that followed the dietary advice the best had the most improvements, which again shows a connection and a causal link, possibly. And the best part is that following this intervention produces no side effects. We don't get these results with antidepressants. This is the thing. We don't get these results with medication. So why is medication the first line therapy for depression and anxiety when we can get these kind of results with food potentially? Now, a lot of people say, well, it's really expensive to eat healthy, but the people in the dietary counseling group went from spending $138 a week on food to $112 a week on food. So their diets got better, the depression went away, and they saved money. It's kind of amazing. So how should we eat for depression? Well, there's a lot of theories I have in my practice. I will work with people to make sure that we are getting the nutrition that's required by the brain. And by doing this, we often focus on displacing the foods that are not healthy. I focus on 4 main aspects of nutritional counseling. The first one is making sure there are adequate macro and micronutrients. So getting enough protein, getting the right kind of carbohydrates, getting enough and the right kinds of fats, as well as the right micronutrients. So the vitamins and minerals that the brain and body need. That's number 1. Number 2 is making sure the diet is as anti-inflammatory as possible by including anti-inflammatory foods and perhaps exploring the removal of more inflammatory foods. This could depend on the person. Things like gluten, dairy, soy, eggs, definitely processed sugar, fried foods and trans fats, all these potentially could affect somebody's diet quality and levels of inflammation in the body. And we know depression and inflammation are connected. The other part is microbiome support. So making sure that we're feeding the bacteria that live in the gut. We know there's a connection between these bugs in our gut and our overall health, but also definitely our mental health, our ability to respond to stress, to make neurochemicals that support the brain. And, to even the communication, like the gut is our third brain. So, whatever is happening in our gut is going to be impacting the rest of the nervous system. And the last part is blood sugar regulation. So a lot of my patients come in on a blood sugar roller coaster. They're hungry every 2 hours. They experience symptoms of anxiety or insomnia that are actually blood sugar drops. Dips in blood sugar put more stress on their nervous system and their stress response. And it is encouraging them to consume less healthy foods, like more sugar, more quick digestible carbohydrates. And so regulating blood sugar through adding more protein, talking about meal timing, and adding in more anti-inflammatory fats is important. So those are the 4 aspects I work with. Research, however, though, supports this idea of something called the MIND diet. The MIND diet was studied for Alzheimer's. It's a modified Mediterranean diet, and it actually decreased the risk of getting Alzheimer's disease by 53% in a study that was almost 1,000 people. So the MIND diet reduces oxidative stress and inflammation, which is one of the aspects that I work with. And these are thought to contribute to mental health issues. Potentially, it can stabilize blood sugar. Potentially, it can, because of all of the nutrient-rich, nutrient-dense foods that it's including, it can support nutrient levels in the body. And then because of the fiber and, again, those nutrients, it's also supporting the microbiome. So it's fitting my 4 criteria for mental health nutrition. So what does the MIND diet consist of? So getting green leafy vegetables 6 times a week, things like chard, broccoli, kale, spinach, collard greens. Getting colorful veggies. So, your red peppers, your squashes, your purple cabbage or red cabbage 7 times a week. So what does this look like? It means every single day you're getting green veggies and you're getting a different color veggie. Consuming berries are very high in antioxidants and support the microbiome as well, twice a week. Using olive oil as the main cooking oil. And I usually go further to tell my patients to use olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, and to completely remove seed oils such as canola, corn oil, margarine, or any of these processed oils that can contribute to inflammation in the brain. The MIND diet consists of nuts and seeds, so adding in almonds, walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, Brazil nuts 5 times a week, so a handful for a snack, which they contain omega-3 fatty acids. Whole grains, your oats, quinoa, brown rice, buckwheat. So these are the slow and healthy carbs that can support the brain, that can fuel the brain's need for glucose. Remember, it's 130 grams a day, but that do it in a manner that's slow and that doesn't spike blood sugar and send us on a blood sugar roller coaster. Consuming fish, especially the fatty fish that are high in the marine omegas like EPA, which has been studied to improve mood. I have other videos on how to choose a fish oil and, foods for mental health. So check out my other videos after this one's done. Consuming these kind of fish at least 1 time a week. Now, this is a minimum, right, for just hitting the criteria for the MIND diet, but we have to define the diet in order to study it. So we found that just eating this way improved reduced the risk of someone getting Alzheimer's disease. And, Alzheimer's disease is sort of like an endpoint of the impact, an issue with the brain. And we know that depression and anxiety, they can be connected to dementia, conditions like Alzheimer's. But when we're supporting our brain, we're going to be supporting our mood. And so a diet that's been studied to support the brain, we can translate to supporting mood, especially because it hits those mood elevating dietary criteria by being anti-inflammatory, being nutrient dense, supporting the microbiome, and regulating blood sugar. Consuming beans 4 times a week, again, a good source of protein, and consuming poultry, so chicken or turkey 2 times a week, but not fried. So, something like this. Some quinoa with a piece of salmon on top, some colorful veggies, some green leaves under here, and you've got a MIND diet meal ready for you. And it's delicious. Best of all, they also, because it's Mediterranean diet based, recommend a glass of wine per day for the polyphenols that can support the microbiome and our antioxidants that support the brain. Foods to limit or avoid on the MIND diet are margarine, which is made of, so it's hydrogenated processed seed oils like corn or canola oil. Definitely not good for you. Better to choose butter. They did limit cheese, probably because it has some inflammatory components for a lot of people, but it wasn't to completely eliminate it. It was to limit it to less than once a week. With my patients, we're always identifying if dairy is a problem for them, and there are ways that we go about that. I have a video on elimination diets in my channel that you can check out. They limited fried food to less than once a week. So again, it's not like a complete removal of everything you love, but having pizza, fries, that kind of thing, no more than once a week. And limiting pastries and sweets to 3 times a week or less. So again, still bringing in some joy in your life, but limiting the amount that you consume. Now, is this the best diet on earth? Do I eat like this? I would have to say I don't consume any cheese, very few fried foods and pastries, and I don't touch margarine at all. And I consume a little bit differently than the Mind diet, probably more veggies and more animal based products. But it's a really good place to start, and we have the benefit of this diet in the research, and it's also not a terribly difficult diet to follow. It's also not even what they were following necessarily in the SMILES trial. This is a step beyond the SMILES trial. The SMILES trial was sort of just counseling on nutrition and talking about, what's a good food choice? What's a good portion size? Let's track our food. That was more the content of the dietary counseling. So it wasn't even a prescribed diet. So it just shows you the power of food. So a sample meal plan, like what does it look like? What would you be eating? Well, so I always counsel my patients to have protein in the morning. Protein, a serving of protein would be like a cup of kefir or Greek yogurt, 3 eggs, a piece of meat, a scoop of protein powder in your oats or in a smoothie. So for example, you might do a oat bowl or granola bar bowl and have a cup of kefir, some chia seeds or ground flax seeds, a quarter cup of large flake oats for your carbohydrates, and a cup of berries. And you've already checked off a bunch of things in your Mind diet. Kefir, if you can tolerate dairy, and you can always switch this up for coconut kefir, but then just add some protein powder to it or collagen powder. But kefir is one of the best sources of probiotics, and a lot of the probiotic studies use kefir rather than a supplemental probiotic. For lunch, you might do something like 2 cups of veggies, like spinach or kale, to get your leafy greens in, a protein like chicken breast or salmon. Definitely make your own salad dressing. This is one of the key things for eating well, is to eliminate those store-bought salad dressings that contain soy oil and olive oil, and to replace it with, maybe using tahini or olive oil or a vinegar. I like to use a tablespoon of tahini, a tablespoon of lemon juice, and some olive oil in a salad dressing. You can do a teaspoon of olive oil or you can do a whole tablespoon. 2 tablespoons of olive oil is helpful for improving someone's cholesterol profile and reducing possibly their insulin resistance, reducing fatty liver, and supporting good health in the body. And the polyphenols in olive oil are good for the brain and the eyes and the blood vessels. So lots of health benefits to olive oil. Throw in a handful of pumpkin seeds, add some extra tryptophan there, cut up a quarter of an avocado, and maybe throw in a quarter cup of chickpeas for your carbohydrates and for your legumes. Dinner. So are you a pasta person? You can use legume pasta. This is a hack that I'll coach my patients on, because legume pasta is pretty clean. It's just made of something like, chickpea flour or lentil flour or mung bean and edamame flour, and it's made into your favorite pasta shape. And it contains, like, some of these forms of legume pasta have about like 20 grams of protein per serving. So if you're a vegan or vegetarian, these are great foods to consume. Really easy to consume. And I'm an Italian who's gluten-free. And so when I consume legume pasta, it's the closest thing, in my opinion, to gluten pasta. It has that chewy texture, cooks in 5 to 7 minutes. It's a little bit more expensive than like a rice pasta or a kind of a crappy like wheat pasta, but it's worth it because it keeps you full. It's got lots of good fiber and really easy to consume. So I like the brand Explore Cuisine. They sell it at a grocery store that's near my house. You make your sauce, so you throw in some tomato sauce. You can saute peppers, broccoli, onion, garlic, top it with some olive oil, and then put your Italian spices on top and make it like a pasta salad, or cook all of these veggies and throw it on. It looks so good. And it's protein rich for stabilizing blood sugar, keeping you full, reducing sugar cravings, and keeping your mood high. Also making your gut microbiome happy with those gut loving fibers. So this is the example of the bulk barn legume pasta here, Explore Cuisine. So there's obviously way more we can talk about with nutrition. I mean, when I work with somebody, I'm having them fill out a diet diary for a week, and we're really delving into what are the key strategies for improving their diet. Following and changing the way you eat is not easy, and it's very nuanced. Like, some of us just need to, like, add an extra cup of veggies to our day. Some of us, it's important to be regulating blood sugar, and that's a big part of our nutrient, improving our health through nutrition. So I'm always looking at, like, what's the smallest thing someone can do to improve their health. But we're also using therapeutic diets to solve gut issues, to improve the health of the microbiome, to resolve other conditions that someone might be coming in with, like, high cholesterol or fatty liver or insulin resistance. Or we're supporting weight gain, muscle mass. So whatever someone's goals are, we're using food and making food recommendations that suit that person. We're also taking into account how someone lives, the availability of healthy foods, what makes sense for them and their lifestyle. And anytime I'm making food recommendations for somebody, I'm always considering that a recommendation I'm making is something they can do when they're 80 years old. And so they'll be happy living with these recommendations for the rest of their life. It does very little to put someone on a 30-day detox, diet where they're eating perfectly, and then have them just fall off and feel discouraged and defeated and go back to their old ways, and to feel out of control around food. So every single person's different, but I hope that this presentation convinces you on the power of food to improve your mood and compels you to investigate a little bit more. I'm going to have a link in my bio for something called the Cortisol Cure Challenge. It's a free challenge. It consists of 5 little videos that get sent to your inbox, one every day, that teach you how to improve your cortisol levels, which is the main stress hormone that's involved in mood, to help support your energy levels, reduce your sugar cravings, help you sleep better, and hopefully improve your mood in as little as 5 days. And I want to know how you do. If you do it, let me know how it works for you. Let me know if you have any questions about it. And check out my channel. Please subscribe, please like the video, and please tell me what you thought of this video. I have yoga videos and meditation videos and some other videos that tell you how to improve your mood, mental, and physical health for the rest of your life using naturopathic medicine. Take care, everyone. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.